Ever wish you could like effortlessly just weave the perfect words into your English conversations? You know, those ones that make you sound super sharp and confident?
Yeah.
Well, that's what today's deep dive is all about.
Nice.
Giving you the tools to do just that.
I like it.
We are taking a look at this awesome guide.
Okay.
How to learn English vocabulary and improve speaking.
Okay.
And trust me, it is jam-packed with actionable strategies.
Cool.
Like you could start using these today.
Love it. Yeah. So let's jump right in.
What I find really interesting is this guide emphasizes learning vocabulary in a way that like mirrors how our brains naturally work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that.
Okay, so our brains,
Yeah.
they aren't wired for memorizing isolated bits of information.
Yeah.
They crave connections.
Yeah. It's like we're building a mental web.
Oh,
The
no.
more connections you create,
Yeah.
the stronger that web becomes and the easier it is to recall information.
So instead of just tackling like random words,
Yeah.
we should be grouping them strategically.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember trying to memorize the periodic table in school.
Ugh, tough.
Yeah, right.
So tough.
But what if you learned about elements that share similar properties together?
Okay.
It suddenly becomes much more manageable because your brain can see the relationships.
This reminds me of the guide's suggestion to learn vocabulary in groups like fruits and vegetables, or even things you'd find in a toolbox.
Exactly. And the beauty is you can tailor this to your own interests.
Well, that's cool.
Let's say you're a huge foodie.
Uh,
Why not create a vocabulary group for different cuisines?
I like that.
Or maybe you're a tech enthusiast. Group those tech terms together.
Yeah, it's like you're creating your own personalized vocabulary map, highlighting the areas that matter most to you.
Exactly.
And speaking of things that help information stick,
Okay.
can we talk about flashcards for a second?
Sure.
I know they might seem a bit old school,
Right.
but this guide actually made me rethink how I use them.
Right.
Yeah.
Flashcards often get a bad rap for being all about rote memorization, but there's so much more than that. Think of them as a tool for active recall.
So it's not just about mindlessly flipping through a stack.
Not at all.
Okay.
It's about actively trying to recall the meaning of a word
Right.
without looking at the answer right away. This effort, even if you struggle at first, is what strengthens the neural pathways in your brain and helps those words stick in your long-term memory.
It's like giving your brain a little workout.
Yes,
And the guide also mentions this cool technique called spaced repetition, right?
exactly.
Okay.
Spaced repetition takes advantage of the fact that our brains are more likely to remember something if we revisit it at increasing intervals. So instead of reviewing your flashcards all at once,
Right.
you space out your review sessions. Maybe review them again in a few hours.
Okay.
Then again the next day, then a few days later.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Okay. It's like setting little reminders for your brain
yeah,
to keep that information fresh.
precisely. And the great thing about flashcards
Yeah.
is they're portable.
Yep.
You can slip them in your pocket and review them anytime, anywhere.
Okay. So we've been talking about these awesome techniques for expanding our vocabulary, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, language is all about communication, right?
Absolutely.
And that means actually speaking it.
You can have a vast vocabulary,
Right.
but if you're not using those words in conversation,
Yeah.
they're not reaching their full potential.
And that's where this guide's emphasis on speaking practice
Yeah.
really hit home for me.
Right.
I mean, it seems obvious, but
Yeah.
how often do we actually prioritize speaking practice?
It's easier said than done, right?
For sure.
But even short bursts of daily practice can make a world of difference.
Okay.
The key is to find opportunities to use your growing vocabulary in real conversations.
The guide even suggests finding a language partner, someone you can practice with regularly. I love that idea.
It's like having a built-in accountability buddy
Yeah,
for your English journey.
I like that.
And it doesn't have to be someone who's perfectly fluent, just someone who shares your goal of improving.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I find helpful? Sometimes I'll even record myself speaking English.
Uh-huh.
It feels a little silly at first,
Yeah.
but it's amazing how much you can learn by listening back to yourself.
That's a fantastic tip. And it brings up another important point from the guide,
Okay.
the importance of embracing mistakes.
Oh, yes. That's something I still struggle with. I'm always so worried about making mistakes, especially when I'm speaking.
That's totally understandable. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
Mistakes are not the enemy. In fact, they're valuable learning opportunities.
Interesting.
Think of it this way. Every time you make a mistake, it's like your brain is saying, hey, pay attention. This is something we need to work on.
It's like our brains are giving us personalized feedback.
Exactly. Instead of fearing mistakes, try to view them as stepping stones on your path to fluency.
I like that.
And speaking of real-world practice, have you ever noticed how much easier it is to learn new words when you encounter them in a movie or TV show you love?
Oh, absolutely. It's like those words just seep into your brain without even trying.
Yes.
The guide emphasizes surrounding yourself with English media as a fun and effective way to learn.
Exactly. And the beauty of this is that you're learning in context. You're not just seeing a word on a page. You're hearing how it's used naturally with all the nuances of pronunciation, intonation, and even body language.
Okay, interesting. It's like your brain is making these like subconscious connections between the word, their meanings, and the emotions or like situations they're linked to.
Precisely. And it's so much more engaging than just memorizing definitions from a dictionary.
Right. Speaking of engaging, I have to ask, do you have any like favorite shows or podcasts that you'd recommend for English learners?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It depends on your interests, of course. But I always tell my students to think about what they already enjoy watching or listening to in their native language. Do you love documentaries? Find some great English language documentaries. Are you a sucker for a good sitcom? There are tons of those too. The key is to choose something you'll actually look forward to watching or listening to.
That's so true. Because if you're not enjoying it, you're less likely to stick with it.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to start with something that has subtitles or transcripts available. That way you can always double check your understanding or look up new words as you go.
That's a good idea.
It's like having training wheels for your ears.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've got speaking practice. We've got immersing ourselves in English media. What about reading? I have to admit, sometimes curling up with a good book in English, it feels a bit daunting.
I hear you. But the guide makes a really compelling point about how reading exposes you to a much wider range of vocabulary than you might encounter in everyday conversation.
It's like leveling up your language skills.
Exactly.
In a way that feels almost effortless.
And just like with TV shows and podcasts, I'd encourage you to choose books that genuinely interest you. Don't force yourself to read something you find boring. Just because you think it's good for you. The more you enjoy the reading experience, the more likely those words are to stick.
So to bring it all together, it sounds like the key to like boosting our English vocabulary is to create this multifaceted approach, a blend of like strategic learning and enjoyable immersion.
You got it. It's about finding what works for you and building a routine that feels sustainable and engaging. Remember, language learning is a journey, not a race.
That's a good way to put it.
There will be peaks and valleys, moments of fluency and moments of stumbling. But by embracing the process, celebrating your progress, and never being afraid to make mistakes, you'll be amazed by how far you can go.
This has been such an inspiring deep dive. It's like we've unlocked this treasure chest of practical tips and strategies. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling motivated to put these ideas into action right away.
That's the spirit. And as you continue on your English learning adventure, here's something to ponder. The guide talks about learning phrases, not just individual words. What are some common phrases in your native language that might have interesting equivalents in English?
Oh, that's interesting.
Think about it. It's a fun way to expand your vocabulary and add a touch of cultural flair to your conversations.
That's such a great point to end on. It's like, we're not just learning English. We're building bridges between languages and cultures.
Exactly. And who knows, you might even teach us a new phrase or two along the way.
That's a good idea. I like it.
All right.
Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah, this was fun.
Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And until next time, happy learning, everybody.